one of the things that, I live by, man, is that I know that I drink from a well that I didn't dig,
Yes.
right? And I know I stand on shoulders of giants who paved the path for us to be here. And so, knowing a little bit about what you've just laid out for us from a historical perspective, can you tie some of your story into the historical narrative of movements of empowerment, right? One being the civil rights movement, right? I know there's a personal connection, and reading your bio to that story that I'd love for you to kind of share and to shape it how it frames your work now in that sense, because I see the legacy, the continuation of now taking the mantle and now trying to carry it forward so that another community, another generation, just like this community is trying to light a lamp so that others can follow and empower a nation of people to do more.
Certainly. As you were speaking, what came to mind, I was fortunate to spend quite a bit of time with Reverend Jesse Jackson
Mm,
when my beginning of my corporate career. It's funny how we how we get and how he gets called in. So the company I worked for, New York Life, was named in the reparations lawsuits, right? And when I came in, as you saw in the book, in this leadership development program, I was asked to do a profitability analysis of the cultural marketing group they had at the time.
mhm.
So 20 years, 25 years ago, I guess now, the company was forward thinking enough to say, you know what, if we're going to drive sales and recruiting, then seeing and watching the changing face of America, the Asians, the Hispanics, these communities are growing. These are communities typically with money and sort of believe in saving and investments. We should start, gearing up our marketing and outreach and advertising to touch those folks.
Mhm.
And they asked me to do an analysis to say, for what we're pouring into, the resources to support these folks, what are we getting back? And I'm like, wow, as I went through the numbers, I'm like, this is amazing. Not only in the way of recruiting, in the way of sales, in the way of excitement and enthusiasm of those agents now working those markets, feeling proud. My company has, materials in language and the likes, right? That I'd asked about, what about the African American market? Because there's nothing being steered and targeted over there, right?
Right.
Which they said, if you remember, well, there was two answers I got. That the first was, we don't have to do anything targeted and specific for Black people because you all speak English. You disperse throughout America. We just use the general market materials, i.e. the white materials, right? And I'm
Right.
thinking in 2020, 2001 now, you see the value of advertising and targeting these other groups, but not my community. You're going to
Right.
want to go to Black churches, Black colleges, Black families with the same old white material. And I'm like, wow, could this really be the case? And so folks pull me aside to say, well, maybe there's more to the story, right? There's a belief around here that you guys don't want to buy insurance, right? And what you buy are those small burial policies. But what happens to those
Mm,
policies? They elapse. And what happens to the agents that sell them? They don't make it in the business, so they say it's a negative return on investment to even sink resources into supporting the Black
ah,
community, right? So either we don't see the value or we're purposely avoiding taking on making outreach to your people. It got me fired up. So
yes, sir.
by then I've written a white paper which was sitting around where I started the story was so we got named in the reparations lawsuit. So nobody was trying to take on this African American market, right? But when we got named in the lawsuits, Reverend Jackson calls the CEO and says, seems like you've got a problem. Maybe we can work together for a remedy, to
Mm,
create a remedy, right? And so that's when, folks looked around, well, what are we doing in the African American market? Now we have all these issues in front of us. So that's how I got pulled to the front and pushed out there to say, you said you got a plan, start going with this. But under that, and where I'm going is that Reverend Jackson was the one who introduced us to Cirillo McSween, the
mm,
first Black agent. But well, before even that, Reverend Jackson, and spending time with him and talking to him about our 400-year history, especially, he talked about the phases. He called it the symphony, right? The phases of the symphony of the Black community. The
right.
first, like you said, the shoulders on which we stand were those who fought to end slavery, right? So that then, like I said, that we didn't just get here by ourselves. There was a
Right.
whole mission and movement towards that. That then there was the ending segregation, right? That then of course there was equal access and civil rights, right?
Right.
And then of course now we are where we are today is this economic empowerment, right? Access to deal flow and the likes. That's where we are. So standing on all those shoulders is what he planted in me of that this is just like I said, the baton being passed.
Right.
And for the company and the industry I was in, it was amazing because he introduced us to the first agent to cross the color barrier. So we had Black insurance companies from the time of the end of slavery, right? That realized that, you know, to put somebody in the ground, if you didn't have the resources, you were sort of lost. And we could pool together to create an insurance company to make that happen, because the white insurance companies weren't doing that for us. And so there were Black insurance companies, Atlanta Life, North Carolina Mutual, Golden State Mutuals. So there were a number of Black insurance companies who would come into the industry. But of course, during segregation had their own marketplace. But as the world was changing, of course, the folks were fighting for integration. The white companies said, you know what, well, let's look into this space now and figure out, you know, is it worthwhile? Because they had said before, because of our mortality, where they said we died earlier than other folks, they didn't want to insure us, or we had riskier, you know, life habits and conditions and health. So they didn't want to insure us. There were some studies that came out into the 60s and 70s that said, you know what, that the white middle class was rising. The mortality levels were not as bad as they previously thought. And so Cyril McSween was the first. Then they said they were going to hire into a white insurance company, which was good in some regards because it gave us access to additional and larger policies and products. But of course, it became the beginning of the end for the Black insurance companies. And so, you know, seeing Cyril McSween cross the color barrier, he didn't do it just for himself. This was about the greater calling, the greater purpose, to use this tool. When I spent time with him, I said, you know, what is it that we need to learn from you? And why did you do what you do? And he said, you know, I wanted us to not use it for burial, but to create an estate for ourselves and to see the value of leaving a legacy, right? To create an estate and to leave a legacy. So, you know, and he said, you know, you saw the story there, 26 years, the first Black agent to hit the $1 Million Round Table for, you know, 26 years, became the treasurer for Martin Luther King. And he says, you know what, this is what I've pioneered in this space. And I'm handing you the baton to continue to spread this message, right? To leverage these tools to create something bigger and better for the Black community. So that's, you know, what, like you said, to close this out, is the idea that, you know, when I was, you know, challenged within the company, challenged with my folks, challenged with trying to spread this message, I would think, you know, what would Cirillo do? Well, you know, we think about what he had to go through as the first in the office, right? When they were clear to say, we don't want you here, right? You're not welcome here. You know, I didn't have to face those kind of things that he did, right? To think about what the lack of training, the lack of guidance, the lack of support that he didn't get, right? That I did have, you know, my experience was greatly better because of those who'd gone before. So it made me suck up sometimes when I was struggling, thinking that I was going through it or had issues, compared to those who gone before, right? And the work that had been done and you know, endured for us to be here, that I have no excuse, no reason not to push even harder.